down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news, tips, and your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus Visionary Joe Edelman.
That's me. Hey gang, thanks for joining me for another live episode of TogChat. Before we get going, please, I need all of you, take a moment, tell your photography friends that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Facebook, Twitter, you know they're the fastest way to get the word out. You can go ahead and you can click the share button right underneath the video down there, or you can go ahead and you can share that link that I just put in the chat window, tog.chat/live. And of course, we've got people here already from like all over the world. So please make it a point, check in, let me know that you're here, let me know where you're from. I got Ted here from Baltimore, I've got John from the UK, Mad Blazer 89 from Romania, Mark in Brunswick, Canada, Ajax is here in Texas, Alvin in Virginia, Steve out in Wisconsin. It's a little cold out there, Minnesota, Steve, a little cold out there, I'm sure. Marcus is here from Germany. You guys are all awesome, really. So thank you for being here. But check in, let me know you're here. And of course, why are we here? To learn. So start posting your questions. I will do my best, as always, to answer as many as I can in the next 60 minutes. Now, I do have a few announcements for you tonight and some news. But let's go ahead and start with a quick chat about something that is important to me, something that I talk about a lot, and that is the question why, right there, okay? You know, it's such a simple question, yet all too often photographers forget to ask the question. You know, it's funny because young children, they are pros at this question. Why is the sky blue? Why does ice cream melt? Why is grass green? Why do I have to go to school? Why do I have to go to bed? Why is actually all about something called causality. Cause and effect. You know, everything that we do as photographers has cause and effect, especially the stuff that depends on physics. The exposure triangle, depth of field, inverse square law are all cause and effect principles. And as I routinely point out, so many of you have a little bit more than just an overview understanding of these principles, and that's not ideal. Something like adding a red gel or mixing blue and yellow gels creates cause and effect. Every creative decision that we make as photographers has cause and effect, right? But all too often, what we don't do is we don't ask why. We've forgotten that wonderment, that thirst for knowledge that we had as kids. Now, you know, some people think they know it all. Others are just too simply lazy to care. The good news for all of you is that asking why, it actually doesn't take a lot of effort. And it can also help you be more efficient. It can help you improve your photography. And more importantly, it can help all of us increase our creativity. Now, there is a downside. That downside is that sometimes the answers that we come up with, it will require us to put in some real work to make a difference. Now, at the end of my discussion during last week's TogChat, I encouraged all of you to remember why you picked up a camera in the first place. Right? Now, this was, of course, after talking about all the rumors that Olympus was going out of business and all the stress that it was creating for people. You know, ironically, as a side note, while I was delivering that message to you on another very popular YouTube channel, the declaration was being made at that moment that Nikon is dying and on the verge of going out of business. In fact, this YouTuber, who of course doesn't work for Nikon and has no inside information other than the publicly published financial reports, this YouTuber claimed to have all the answers for what Nikon needed to do to become profitable. Wow. That 22-minute video, by the way, has over 143,000 views. I mean, good for him if he's out for nothing more than views, but wow, how did that help anybody? I mean, just think about how much money all of these camera companies could save. I mean, all of them. If they would just go ahead and get rid of their marketing and their leadership teams and just follow the advice of some guy on YouTube. I mean, That's what an awful lot of photographers are doing anyway, so why not the camera companies? You know, that same YouTuber followed up with a video about killing JPEGs. A 16-minute long video that has nearly 100,000 views, and yet it completely overlooks the very reason why JPEGs aren't going away anytime soon, and more importantly, why we can't kill them. All it does is it creates anxiety by suggesting to people that years from now, you won't be able to read your JPEGs because there will be this new technology and we will have moved on. You know, not to mention that the video includes some rather questionable technical statements. So look, for all of you, let's set the record straight on why we can't kill JPEGs. That video that I'm referring to, it makes a very arrogant assumption that camera companies should just institute this new technology because it's more efficient and it represents the future. Well, you know, interestingly, the fact is that the camera companies actually do have the ability to do that. It's mostly a software modification. It doesn't really impact the hardware as much. But the reason that they are in no rush, and the reason why we can't kill JPEGs, and I want you to pay attention to this, it's because of this little thing called the internet. You may have heard of it. Currently, no major web browser supports the HEIC format that this YouTuber declares is the future. As a result of that, social media platforms do not support the HEIC format for still images. Now, the other reason why we can't kill JPEGs in favor of the HEIC yet, follow along, HEIC was born, it evolved from video files. It is high quality and it is very efficient. But Apple was the company who got behind it for stills and migrated it onto the iPhones and made them use the HEIC format. However, this other little company that you may have heard of, they're called Google. Google is also championing a new image format called WebP, W-E-B capital P. It is a derivative of the VP8 video codec. It supports lossless compression, and unlike current JPEGs, it allows both transparency and animation that combine the images coded with both lossless and lossy compression, which if you don't know what those are, you should do a little research because that's important to know. The bottom line, it makes the format WebP very versatile and it actually gives photographers more control. Now here's the rub. WebP, it's already usable on the Chrome browser and on Android browsers and Android phones. And by the end of this year, it will be functional on Microsoft Edge browsers and Firefox browsers. And shocker, the one that it's not going to be functional on is Apple's Safari and the iOS. They don't support WebP with no plans that have been announced to do so. So look, we can't kill JPEGs, so everybody just take a breath. There is new technology coming. But just like VHS and Betamax, remember those? It's going to take a while to crown a winner and to move on. Now, does that mean that you have to worry about your JPEGs when the new format goes into widespread use? Of course not. Seriously. You know, let's go backwards first. When VHS won the race, you were able to get your Betamax tapes converted. When CDs replaced VHS, you were able to get your tapes burned to a CD. When CDs faded away, you were able to migrate your files to hard drives. Look, JPEGs are such a prevalent part of our technology today, and they are in such widespread use. A major component of the success of any new technology will be whether or not it is backwards compatible or has the ability to convert the older formats, like JPEGs, to the newer ones. There are so many JPEGs in use in the world today, it would not be practical to simply abandon them. That's not going to happen. I mean, this is one of the great things about technology, all the technology that we have today. It would require just a few lines of code as opposed to hours and great amounts of money to convert your JPEGs like you had to do with the tapes and the CDs. I mean, think about it. Seriously, think about this. It is more likely that your old RAW files will eventually become unreadable because there are way fewer RAW files of any given format than there are JPEGs in the world. JPEGs work with all cameras. RAW files are specific to brand. So there's a greater likelihood that any company could just stop supporting an old version of a RAW file and then go in a new direction. Now, that doesn't mean that you should start shooting JPEGs, so relax. But this is a big part of why I am reminding you to remember why. Why did you pick up your camera in the first place? Why do you shoot what you shoot? You know, when somebody tells you a camera club is dying, or that JPEG should go away, or, come on, that you have to use rule of thirds, or that you need to overpower the sun to take a portrait in bright sunlight, or that you need to use high-speed sync, or, look, you get the point. You need to ask why. Yes, asking why will mean that you will need to do some research, put in some effort, actually learn something so that you can think for yourself, which will always have a better outcome than being one of those mindless zombies that follows along with the crowd just because some guy on YouTube said that you should. This topic, why, isn't just about learning photography, by the way. It's also about doing photography. Let me give you an example. Business headshots for social media. Just one small example. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need a portrait. The first question that you should ask when somebody says, hey, I need a portrait. Why? What's it for? Is it going to hang on a wall above a fireplace in a living room? Is it going to be used as a social media profile? Is it a business headshot to go on your company's website or to go on your LinkedIn profile? What is it for? The answer to that why has a very big impact on how you are going to shoot that image. Because certainly you're going to shoot that formal portrait for the wall above the fireplace, much different than you're going to shoot a business portrait, much different than you're going to shoot a modeling or acting headshot, much different than you're going to shoot a creative beauty portrait or fashion portrait. So why is the important question? And believe me, these are just a few examples of that why is so important. So please, when it comes to learning, learn how to ask why, and then learn to think for yourself. Pick up the camera, challenge yourself, figure out how to solve the problems that you encounter. Don't let somebody else tell you how you have to shoot, and don't think that shooting like somebody else makes you a better photographer. I'm sorry, but that only serves to make you a lesser copy. Just does. So when it comes to actually shooting, always ask why. Why are you taking a shot? What are you hoping to accomplish? The answers to these questions are the roadmap. The roadmap to making better, more appreciated images. That's a roadmap that you can't find on YouTube. Not even from me. So thank you. Now, we have a little tiny bit of news and we have some questions. So let's go ahead and let's dive into that really quick. So I am going to just very quickly here. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. Let's go back to that shot right there. I'm going to load up an image that I want to show you guys, which I unfortunately did not get it loaded before I went on the air. But let's see if we can get this set up here. There was a very good and very cool, actually, you know what? We're going to do it. We're going to do it the old school way and bring it up online. In fact, son of a gun. Let me just tell you about it. How about if we do that? I had it all set up and it's not where it was supposed to be. So there was a big announcement today. That big announcement came from one of those companies that was supposedly not doing well and was supposedly going to go away and all that stuff. That company, that announcement is Olympus, right? So Olympus did something that they rarely do. Now, in all fairness and full disclosure, this information that I'm about to mention, they released this morning. It is an update. So it's an update on information that they had published earlier in the year. It is their lens roadmap for the upcoming year. And gosh, am I irritated that I am not finding this image. I apologize. But the bottom line is this. They went ahead and they did it, and I'm sure that it was, partly in response to all the drama that took place last week. I have no doubt. But the exciting thing is that there are more lenses coming that we knew. We knew about, the 150 to 400 millimeter lens. There are some more primes coming. There are some more zoom lenses coming. There's also, if you go check out the rumor sites, so this is not part of the Olympus announcement, but the rumor sites usually, hey, look, they do a pretty good job of nailing it. There are some pretty good rumors about, multiple cameras coming out next year. So this is not a company that's going away, gang. In fact, the stuff they're doing is actually really exciting. What this information does support, okay? It actually, to me, it's got nothing to do even with, they're not going out of business. That's not why I'm excited. I'm excited because to me, that confirms what we've known all along. It doesn't disprove this I'm going out of business thing. It proves that the information that we knew prior to this stupid rumor spreading was actually very accurate. It proves that in financial disclosures, Olympus was very straightforward for the last couple of years about having to close a factory, having to move their operations, knowing that there was going to be at least a year of very little new product, very little innovation hitting the street, very little excitement about Olympus gear. That they were going to be using that time to do research and development and, of course, set up the new factory and the new production lines. That is done. The factory is in place, the production lines are working, and now they are back full speed ahead with new product coming from new research and development, new innovation. It's happening, right? So I will make it a point, since I'm such a dunce and do not have the link where it was supposed to be, I will make it a point to post the link in the video when we're done. So that if you haven't seen it, it's all over social media, but if you haven't seen it, I will make sure that you have access to it and can view it. But if you're an Olympus shooter, check it out. If you're not an Olympus shooter, obviously you don't care, but it's just one more piece of information. And hopefully it will, again, give you folks a little bit more comfort when you hear some of these rumors, because, of course, we heard that Nikon is dying. Everybody's dying. Everybody dies, right? It happens. So the other thing that I wanted to remind you guys about, I'm not all about, pushing you to spend money, so I'm not telling you, hey, you should spend money. But you need to be paying attention. This week is the week. This is Black Friday leading into Cyber Week. All of your photo retail suppliers, everybody from, B&H and Adorama down to your smaller regional photo retailers like Hunt's Photo and Video, Pixel Connection, Biggs, Precision Camera, Competitive Camera, and the list goes on and on and on. Cardinal Camera, you name it, Unique Photo. They have all got awesome deals going on this week. Magmod has some killer sales. So the bottom line is, if there has been a piece of gear, even, Olympus, Nikon, Canon, all of them, they've got sales. So if there's been a piece of gear that you have been interested in, have been wanting, don't keep your head in the sand this week. Make sure you're checking out the websites. A lot of the companies like Magmod, their sales start kind of at midnight, and then it's until there's a limited number, and so it's until the stuff sells out. So you kind of got to be there ready to go, right? But indeed, if there's, so I'm not saying, hey, go out and buy gear for the hell of buying gear. Come on, you know better, right? But if there's stuff that you have been looking for, if there's been stuff that's been on your list, now's a really good time to be paying attention because it's likely to be very affordable. So keep track of that, all right? Okay, so that being said, let's get to the part that everybody likes, right? That's the Q&A. So where are we at here? We got a solid 40 minutes here that we can do Q&A. So I saw a couple good questions go by, but I know there's not a lot. So come on, let's get that stuff loaded here. I'm going to scroll back up to the beginning and see what actually, sorry. I need to take care of a question that's actually come up a few times before this poor man shoots me. Marcus has asked me a couple of times about the new case that I travel with. So I am going to update my travel video for you guys. But the first thing is I want to give you all the links. So I posted this video last year. I just put the information in the chat window there for you guys. So I'm going to do a screen share here really quick, and I'll show you guys. So this is the case that I was using. This is the case that you see in the video. It's the Pelican 1560. So it's one of the original Pelican design cases, which means it's a little on the heavy side, okay? Basically, the way that I had it set up is with the Dice Cube foam that you see here. This space in this area right here is where I travel with 4 compact light stands. This space here is where I travel with 4 Godox AD200s, chargers, the bare bulb heads, a few other small accessories that go with them. So the challenge that I had with this case, and you can even see back when I made this video, if you look at the cubes, it was a tight fit for the light stands. And I still had some small cases of cables and some grip gear that wouldn't fit in here. So that was having to go into my suitcase that I travel with. Because when I travel with an equipment case and a full-size suitcase, like one of the big suitcases. And it's maxed out to just under 50 pounds because 50 pounds is your maximum weight limit, right? So the case that I switched to is this case right here. And I'll go ahead and let me grab a link here for that. It is and this is an affiliate link, full disclosure, okay? So, if you use it, yes, I'm going to make a couple pennies when you use it, okay? But this is the Pelican Air 1615. So what's great about this case, and the reason why I switched, this is part of the Pelican Air series, which means it's a thinner, lighter material that the case is built with. The lid actually has a little bit of flex. Not enough flex that your gear is going to get damaged if you're using the foam padding, but it has a little bit of flex. So you want to keep that in mind so that you don't make the mistake of overpacking something where there's no room for the foam to give, right? So also this case measures out at 61.5. And when I say measures out at 61.5, that's when you take the height, the weight, and the depth and you add them together, right? The way the airlines in the United States work, your checked luggage has to be 50 pounds or less, and it has to measure to 62 or less, and then you only pay $40 to check it, unless you have a free checked bag, and then you can check it free. But if you go over that 50 or 62 number, then you're at $200 to check the bag, right? So this is the maximum size case that I could get. So in this case, Marcus, I'm carrying all the same stuff, plus now my cables and a little bit of grip gear. So next week, I am going to drop an update video that'll show you the exact layout. But everything that you see that I'm carrying in that YouTube video, I am, and obviously if you watch the rest of the video, I do show the case packed with everything in it, and all that. But everything that's in here is in the 1615, plus just a couple other little accessories and such, which just make it a little bit easier. And also a lot of the gear now has just a little bit more padding around it. So I'm able to get the extra gear in because even though this case is slightly bigger, it is lighter in weight. So I'm starting out with a lighter case to begin with. So that's where kind of the real benefit of working with that case is. So that's the idea there. Okay. All right. So back to our chat window here. Robert Varner, should you up here? Let me put that on the screen. Should you change or trade in your Nikon D500 because Nikon is dying? No, Nikon's not dying, guys. So many of you, when I became an Olympus, shooter, and then when I became an Olympus ambassador, were asking me like, oh, I'll bet you'll be thrilled if Nikon goes out of business, kind of stick it to them, all that kind of stuff. Every single time my response was the same. I don't want to see Nikon go out of business. It would be devastating if Nikon went out of business. It would be devastating if any one of these camera companies went out of business. Devastating for the industry, meaning if Canon goes out of business tomorrow, I would suffer. You would suffer. You don't have to be a Canon owner, okay? That's just going to create such a mess in the industry. Believe me, we don't want that to happen, okay? We just don't. So, there's no reason that you have to go and sell your gear because of any of these videos and proclamations that are being made by various YouTubers, okay? Can I guarantee you that none of these companies will ever go out of business? Of course I can't. That's part of the scenario here, right? I cannot see the future. I do not have inside knowledge. Neither do these people that are claiming that they're going out of business, right? They just don't, okay? So it's something that you don't worry about. And plus, most of you, please don't get me wrong, but if you think about it, most of you are purchasing new cameras, not like every 6 months, unless you're Sony users. Sorry, but you're purchasing cameras every couple of years or every 7 or 8 years, okay? Which is actually something that we talked about a lot. So the point is, if they go out tomorrow, it's not necessarily going to have a big impact on you immediately. So it's not like, oh my God, they go out of business. Now I've got to go buy all new cameras tomorrow. Why? Your cameras are still working, right? So, once again, just everybody needs to just chill out and focus on photography, right? That's what got us all started. So anyway, scrolling on up here, Chuck Hill. Any word on if Olympus will be at Imaging USA 2020? I will be there. It's Nashville, man. How could I pass on Nashville? I'm probably just going to be there for 2 days, wandering around. I do not have any speaking gigs lined up, so I am just attending to see what's there, to say hi to people. I also have a couple friends and acquaintances in Nashville that I like to be able to catch up with whenever I get a chance. So I will be there and visiting, but to the best of my knowledge, as it stands now, Olympus is not attending Imaging USA. And Olympus is not the only camera company that will be absent from Imaging USA. And Chuck, I know you were at Imaging, last year in Atlanta. The show was considerably downsized. Even the camera companies that were there, their booths were considerably smaller than usual. Nikon routinely does not go to Imaging. And my understanding is there are potentially some other, camera manufacturers that will not be there this year. Last year Panasonic was barely there. Trade shows have to change, right? They've got to evolve. They've got to change. I think Photo Plus made some great steps in the right direction this year. Obviously it will be next year in terms of whether or not we find out how well that went. But I think it's going to be rough for a little while. So, okay. All right. Now, keeping on going here. Photomix Media. Completely agree with all that said. It's recommended to convert all RAW files to Smart PSD to guarantee my digital images will work with future versions of Photoshop. Photomix Media, I am of the philosophy. So this is an opinion, right? Because there is no factually correct, undebatable answer to that question. Okay? I am of the opinion that we are far enough along with technology that I am not going to have to worry about such things. Let's just think about Adobe for a minute. Now, we know that Adobe historically does some things that really tick off its customer base, right? Adobe has a bit of a reputation at times for not caring about what its customers want or think. You know, obviously we think back about all the fuss that happened when they started the Creative Cloud, yada, 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 right? But here's the thing. If Adobe were to change the PSD format in such a way that you were no longer able to use PSDs, that would be the end of Adobe. Should you always have the compatibility tools checked on in your Photoshop and Lightroom preferences? Absolutely. Because as long as you are doing that, you are essentially, I don't mean this in a bad way, but you're playing along with Adobe and saying, okay, I'm doing the things you're telling me to do to ensure that you are going to protect the longevity of my files, etc. Okay? So yes, if you are a person who wants to be extremely cautious and extremely careful, or if you're just a person that's paranoid, any way it goes, then by all means it makes more sense to go ahead and do those conversions, etc. But I'm not a big fan of investing a lot of additional time and effort in that stuff. And part of the reason is this. Once again, you know, you can go back and you can look at, for instance, DNG files, right? When Adobe came out with the digital negative concept, you know, they thought that everybody would rush the digital negative and it would be this constant and everybody would be on the same page. How'd that work out? Not very well, right? So that's why, like, when we see these videos about HEIC, that's the future, everybody should stop now, go do this. HEIC isn't even the prevalent technology in terms of future forward-looking technologies. Only Apple uses it. So, first of all, it's the wrong one to pick. It's the Betamax. And secondly, the only way this stuff actually, you know, will gain full speed and become the winner will be with backwards compatibility in it, right? So that's my opinion on the whole thing. I choose not to worry too much about it. Possibly I'm wrong. We'll see. But then again, you know, Nikon could go out of business tomorrow and Olympus could be a week behind it, right? Who knows? So, but I don't think that's anything you have to worry about. So, okay. All right. Let's see here. So it's interesting here. I'm going to scroll down because I see a conversation happening here from somebody who I have a lot of respect from. So, I'm going to Irene, I'm going to drag you into this. Okay. If you don't know who Irene Rudnick is, go pay attention, guys. All right, you're missing out. YouTube is getting really saturated with content. I see everybody trying to gain views with sensational titles, but like every trend, it'll go away soon. Irene, I hope so. And then Irene also followed up with somebody's comment here. I've been watching photography channels way before I started my own, and I've never seen as many clickbait titles as I see now. I agree on all counts, Irene. I'm not so sure that it's going to go away anytime soon. I'm really not. And that's a big part of why, at least at this point, I'm putting so much energy into trying to create some awareness around it and just trying to get some focus back. Let's face it, I'm not going to win the battle for sure. But I'm not convinced it's going to go away in the near future. And the reason for that is it's not so much views and subscribers that are driving it. And, you know, Irene, I know that, well, I don't know. Let me rephrase that. I believe you know the folks that I'm talking about the most personally. But I do know, if you don't know them personally, that you are good friends with someone who does. So you have probably heard some inside information about how they make their decisions and how they choose what videos to do and what not to do. All of that being said, the reason why I think it's not going to be a trend that's going to end anytime soon is because it's actually being driven by money. These are people who have critical mass in terms of subscribers. These are people that are actually drawing decent money from YouTube advertising, where many of us, aren't certainly paying our bills with YouTube advertising, right? So it's a way for them to make sure that they are keeping the view count up, which means they're keeping their advertising dollars up. And to me, unfortunately, what's really sad about it is if people would actually pay attention on a broader scope to what these people talk about and the companies that they target and the companies that they're damaging, a big part of it is they're going after companies that don't feed them, companies that don't give them trips, companies that don't give them lots of free gear, companies that don't kiss their butt. They're going, the companies that take them on trips a couple times a year, the companies that hand them free gear the second it comes out, all that stuff, they're not talking trash about those companies. Those are the companies they love. So it's interesting that there is that correlation, right? I can't make any straight up accusations, but I will point out the correlation between that. So, time will tell. We'll see. But it's definitely a big problem. But I would say I'm not so sure it'll go away real soon. And believe me, Irene, I hope that you are right. I really hope that you're right. I would love to see, even the people that are doing this, that are at the root cause of this problem, most of them have a lot of great knowledge to share. And they are very, very capable photographers. If they would get back to the basics and focus on that, they would be providing so much more value to the community. So time will tell. Okay. All right. So let's see. Question here from Houndfit. I have a small M50, but I've invested in more expensive glass. Is this a ridiculous idea to do paid portraits with, or wait until I can afford a more pro camera? The Canon can seem a little soft. Houndfit, that's a question that it's an age-old question, and I'll tell you straight up, it's a foolish question to ask. And I'm not trying to be mean or be a jerk. Never in my career has someone said, hey, are you able to do this job? And then when I said yes, follow that up with a question of, what brand camera do you use? Never. Certainly in the course of conversation, when I was out doing a job, somebody may say, hey, tell me about that camera. What brand? This? Yeah, it's small talk. But I've never had a client as part of the client. I'm talking about everyone from portraits and weddings to models to major corporations. I've never had somebody ask me about the brand of equipment that I use, ever. And certainly I've never lost a job or been turned down for a job because of a brand of equipment that I use. So that being said, Houndfit, the real key to you charging money and doing professional work is what kind of quality are you producing with the gear that you have now? And actually, more importantly than that, how do potential customers perceive that quality? Right? Because you could go post it in a photography forum on Facebook, and you could get 1,000 photographers to say, oh my God, I love it. It's amazing. But if you can't find people that are not photographers, who are local to you, that will say, oh my God, I love it. It's amazing. Well, then you're never going to get anybody to pay for it, right? So that's ultimately what counts. When I read questions like that, Houndfit, what I'm reading between the lines is honestly, similar to what we're discussing in these bigger topics here, is that you're listening to a lot of the stuff that you hear online and a lot of the statements that are being made by people, and you're feeling that your gear is inadequate because you don't have the latest and the greatest. I promise you, don't let yourself think that way. That's not the answer. Because ultimately the people that you photograph, they don't care, right? That's the thing. They simply don't care. Okay. So let's see here. I can't even, I'm not even sure how to say that name. I'm sorry. I'm like, so Sony A7 III or a Lumix GH5 or something better kind of hybrid. Imagine you want to start a media industry like a studio for doing interviews, video, and also creating some video content and taking, there's more to it. Actually, I didn't see the more. So really, I mean, both of those cameras would do a great job. In terms of something kind of hybrid, if you're going to do just video, so let's be clear, you want to think ahead there, right? But if you're doing just video, I mean, certainly you could look at something that is going to do a little bit higher resolution, maybe like one of the new Blackmagic cameras, or, depending on who your potential clientele is, certainly you might want to look at a Red or something like that. But if it's just kind of a casual thing or an occasional thing, does it make sense to go out and buy a Red? No, definitely not, right? But yeah, the A7 III, the Lumix GH5, they're both great cameras. They both do really good video work. Depending on what you're doing, you can do equally as good work with a Nikon, Canon, or an Olympus, or a Fuji for that matter, right? Do understand that one of the big differences is that with the Panasonics in particular, it's not that they're better quality with video, it's that they've got more third-party gear available for them, accessories, things that simplify your process. I'll take the video quality of my Olympus cameras against the Panasonic cameras any day. But the simple fact of the matter is, I don't have nearly as many third-party accessories available for video for my Olympus gear as I can find for Panasonic gear, right? So, but I have used the GH5, I've used the GH4, great cameras, I'm familiar with the Sony. I mean, again, it really depends, it really depends on what you want to do. So here's a great question. Irene's going to get me in trouble tonight here. I'm going to drop down and grab this one here. Irene's asking, I'm curious if you watch YouTube yourself, and if so, what are your favorite photography channels? I am always on the lookout for those. So, Irene, the answer that I'm going to give you, I have to preface this answer, folks, because there's a lesson here. Not just about Irene's question, but a lesson about photography. Since a lot of you asked about, or frequently ask about, the way I learned photography and how I approach learning photography, this will give you a little bit of insight into what I do and kind of how I do it. So keep in mind that I'm so damn old. When I grew up and learned photography, there was no such thing called the internet, right? The internet wasn't even a dream for most people at that point. So the learning resources that were available to me were finding mentors, real people that I could talk to face-to-face, or because, again, there was no email, text messaging, none of that, or going to the library and getting books. Books in the library when I was a teenager were all written and published in the 1950s and 60s. They were like massive. They were like bigger than the Bible, small print, black and white pictures. They were horrible. Or the other option was the photography magazines, because you had quite a few more then. You had popular photography, you had modern photography. Those were the two big ones here in the US. After that came along American Photography, or American Photographer, and a bunch of others. I followed so I hated the books. They were horrible. And it was all about rules. You have to do this, you have to do that. That's how everything in the books was. I was fortunate enough to find some good mentors early on. I loved the magazines, because the magazines were where I was seeing work by newer photographers, more contemporary photographers, not historical photographers. But the magazines back when I was learning is where I was learning about people like Peter Gallen. It's where I was learning about people like Pete Turner. It's where I was learning about people like David Hume Kennerly and all of these greats from that generation, okay? But now to bring that forward, Irene, I don't watch YouTube videos. I hate watching YouTube videos. Irene, I love you, but I don't like watching your YouTube videos. But let me explain why, because it's nothing personal. It's all about me, okay? When I watch videos that other photographers do, for me, it's the same as looking at another photographer's picture. I wasn't there. I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the fun. So ultimately, why do I care, right? these videos that I've been talking about tonight and last week in my conversation are videos that, of course, people were, sending me message after message after message saying, my God, have you seen what they said now? Yada, yada, yada. So I went and I checked them out, okay? And suffered through them. The way I look at those videos, here's 16 minutes of my life I can't get back. But the reality of it is, for me, because of the way I learned, which was through trial and error, it was through experimenting, it was through screwing stuff up, it was through sitting down, beating my head against the wall, and trying to figure out how do I make it work. When I see other photographers do something, it's painful, especially if they're not doing it the way I would do it. So it's not a matter of disrespect. It's not a matter of I'm better. No, not even close. My God, Irene, I would put your work on a pedestal above mine any day. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's simply a matter of the way that I learned, the way that I continue to learn. And admittedly, the last piece of my answer, there is a bias in terms of the educational aspect. I am, partly because of my wife and what she does. For those of you that don't know, I talk about it frequently. My wife is a PhD in cognitive psychology. Fortunately, it's cognitive, not clinical. I'd be in a straitjacket. But she is a person who has actually done a lot of research over the years in how, as adult humans, we learn and how our brains process information. So for me, I have developed a bias in terms of, is information being presented in a way that people are actually learning from it, and is it being presented in a way that is actually going to be stored, retained from people? It's not to say that yours or anybody else's isn't. It's just to say that I have my way of doing it. So it's impossible for me to watch another video and not apply those standards. And so it just kind of becomes frustrating, right? What I look at on YouTube and Facebook and especially Instagram, Irene, is like, honestly, what I love doing when it comes to looking at other photographers' work, I love going through my Instagram wall or feed very rapidly. If an image grabs me that I have to stop, that's probably an image that I want to stop and I want to evaluate. Not in a, is it good or bad, but in a, my God, I love this. I can tell you sincerely, Irene, that your images routinely are images that grab me as I go flying by. There are other photographers whose work will routinely grab me as I go flying by. Sometimes it's because the photographer continually surprises me with their creativity and what they do. Other times it's because that photographer has a very distinctive style that I just like. I connect with it. So, I notice it right away. So from an inspirational standpoint, I tend to draw more from that. From a teaching standpoint, no, I'm a big believer, at least for me, I try very much to only teach from my experience. So that's why obviously all my stuff is people-based. That's why it evolves around portraiture and fashion and models and all those things, because that's been my experience. Certainly I could start doing some portrait and wedding and even start doing some product and food videos because I've had experience with that. But in all fairness, it was years ago, and that experience isn't current and contemporary. So I don't feel that ideally that's where I should be focusing my teaching. So that's kind of how I approach that. But it's actually a great question. So thank you for bringing that up. So, and hopefully everybody kind of gets what I'm trying to say there, because by no means is it meant to be arrogant or to be a jerk. It's just being honest. And it's a big part. If you take that answer that I just gave you folks and you think about it, that's a big part of why I teach this idea of stop watching so much YouTube. Go use your camera. Go learn things. Go fail. Try to fail. Try to fail by experimenting. Try to fail by pushing yourself outside your box. Doing things you've never done before instead of just doing the same old thing, right? That's the idea. So, Jose, thank you so much for the super chat, man. I know you had some questions back here. So let me let me just slide on back to those and get those in the window here, because I saw there were a couple that went by. So Jose, you created a while ago a YouTube video about the live composite photos in Olympus. Yes. And you said not to be in auto white balance and not in auto ISO while creating the awesome backgrounds. That is absolutely correct. And then you went on to say, what were your settings in live composite? Correct. You can't use auto white balance and you can't use auto ISO. The reason being that as you're adding in all the color and painting the backgrounds, the white balance is going to just go all over the place, right? That's problematic. So you want the white balance locked in, and you want the white balance set for the flash, which is basically daylight, right? But you want the white balance set for the flash so that your subject is properly balanced. For me, all of the live composites that you have seen me do with portraiture have been at 1/2 second exposure. So I always work at ISO 100 or 200, depending on the situation. When you see me do it like on a trade show stage, that's at ISO 100 because I've got to overcome all the bright lights in the hall. When you see me do it in my studio, it's usually at ISO 200, the base ISO for my camera. And then my white balance is set for flash, right? And then my goal is usually to shoot around f/16, mainly so that I don't have to deal with any of the ambient light that's in the room. So in other words, I don't have to work in the dark. That's the bonus, behind shooting at f/16. So I hope that helps. So, all right. Let's see here. Harrison, do you find that a lot of portraiture pages post lots of portraits with seeing really flat and underexposed? Yeah, I do. And unfortunately, I don't think it's like, oh my God, this is horrible, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's a situation where you've got a lot of people that are trying to copy other photographers' styles. I'll give you one example, like Sue Bryce. Sue Bryce, who, is a god with her portraiture and the way she has a style to her portraiture that has a very natural vibe to it, very natural feel, right? I see photographers routinely try to copy her work and her style, and it just comes out really flat and blah. Which, if you look at her images, while the tones are very muted, there is still good, crisp contrast in the images. Not harsh contrast, just crisp contrast, right? That's not something that's super, super easy to achieve. And most photographers who try it fail more than they succeed. And yes, we see a lot of that, we see a lot of that online. Part of that, Harrison, is also, I think, part of the influx of what we see with Instagram filters and things like that. So that's something that I would say is hopefully more of a trend that will die down. But yeah, I mean, you do see that. So Matt Brune asking against f/16 and diffraction. Please stop reading the crap on the internet, Matt. Okay. The whole diffraction at f/16, especially on micro four thirds, is not an inaccurate statement, but it's taught as a global definition in the box. You shoot at f/16, you get diffraction, it looks like crap. That is so wrong. Go and look at my live composites, Matt. They look pretty damn good. There's no diffraction. So the problem of it is before people spout that, oh my God, don't shoot at f/16 because the diffraction's horrible on micro four thirds, they really need to go out and learn more about diffraction. What causes it? Where it comes from? Et cetera, et cetera. And then you will understand that there are a lot more factors that lead to diffraction than just shooting at f/16. So yeah, in the studio, in the scenarios that I'm shooting, and in many, many other scenarios, there's no problem with shooting at f/16 with a micro four thirds camera. None at all. Zip. Not a problem. So, Alvin, what is my best DIY light painting tool? I actually show it in that video. Watch the video from Photo Plus in New York. It's a balloon. A yellow, in New York, I used a yellow balloon. In terms of light painting tools. Yeah, that would be my favorite, DIY one. So, okay. Let's see here. Scroll on back up here. Javier, I have no official education in photography. What's your principal source of information? I just made it up, man, because it sounds good. No, kidding. My principal source of information, Javier, is 43 years of paying my bills with a camera. School of Hard Knocks, learned it on the street, whatever version of that you want to put down. I will tell you that whenever I do a video, for instance, when I did my inverse square law video, I spent about 2 days relearning and researching the inverse square law. I've understood it for decades. I know how it works. It's a tool that I use every time I pick up a camera. But I never assume. We know what happens when we assume, right? I never assume that I know everything there is to know about a topic. And I never assume that the way that I've been doing it for years is the best way to do it. So I go back out and I do research. And selfishly, gang, I'll tell you very honestly, that's one of the coolest things about doing the teaching that I do and doing the YouTube videos is I've relearned so much about photography in the course of doing this. So even something like my travel video, I showed the clips before with a case. When I started traveling, I did lots of research about the do's and don'ts, all those things. But when I sat down to do the video, I went out and I did even more research to make sure that I was quoting all the TSA information correctly, to make sure that I had all the sizes right, all of that. Because in my opinion, there is a responsibility if you're going to get on a platform like YouTube and teach to masses. I don't care if that masses is 20 people or 20,000 people or 100,000 people like some YouTubers. You have a responsibility to get the information correct. And I believe you also have a responsibility to make sure that you're being very honest about what is opinion and very honest about what is fact, so that people have the ability to walk away from your videos and make their own choices. I don't ever want to be like those YouTubers that have 1 million subscribers who just follow them like rats, like the Pied Piper. I do not want to be that photographer because I'm not helping people that way. All I've managed to do, if that's who I become, is I've managed to find people that will drink the juice. And we all know how that turned out, right? So, yeah, that's definitely not my goal, okay? Moises, thank you so much. Let me get that super chat up here. Wanted to say hello. Met you at Photo Plus in New York, lens cap. So here, I have to own this one, guys. This was on, I believe this was Saturday at Photo Plus. I came up with this brilliantly stupid idea for Photo Plus this year. There was about 20 minutes before my talk. I did my talk at 12:30 every day. And there was about 20 minutes before my talk where there was nothing going on in the booth. The rock climbers were up on the rock climbing wall, and I was doing my setup. And people were coming to the booth, and there was only about 20 actual seats in the booth. So people had to stand through my talk, which was amazing that people spent a whole hour at the booth and stood through my talk. But they had to stand. So people would come and they would grab the seats. So I would have 20 or 30 people hanging out in the booth watching me set up, which is kind of weird. Like, because here I am, I'm setting all this stuff up. I felt like I needed to talk to people. So by the second day of the show, I asked the folks at Olympus if they would let me have a hot mic, so that while I was setting up, I could chat with people and do a little bit of TogChat live, and actually answer questions for people. So that's what I did, and it worked out really, really well. People showed up as soon as I started talking. Of course, people would stop, and they wonder what was going on, so they were there, and they were asking questions, and all that kind of stuff. Well, on Saturday, I got everything set up, and the one downside to multitasking, because we all actually suck at multitasking. We like to think we're good at it, but we're not. Science proves that, okay? It was about 2 minutes before the start of my talk. The gentleman who was the MC, his name was Andy, he was doing all the announcements about Olympus and telling people, about the new camera, the Mark III and all that stuff. And I got up on stage. I had everything laid out. I thought I was done. And I went to do a test shot to make sure that I had the camera set properly. And I couldn't get the shutter to fire. I'm like, what the heck? So camera's turned on. It's connected. Couldn't get the shutter to fire. Pressing the button. And then all of a sudden, the shutter fires randomly. And I'm trying again. Couldn't get the shutter fire. All of a sudden, the shutter fires randomly again. Now I'm panicked. I've got about 100 people at the booth. They're waiting. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I saw standing at one of the counters, about 15 feet from the stage, one of the really, really hardcore tech guys from Olympus. And I ran over and grabbed him. I'm like, Matt, my camera's going haywire. I can't get the fire. Now, at this point, what I'm thinking is that morning, I had the tech team that was doing the cleaning checks at the show. I had them clean my cameras because I'm there, get it done, right? So I thought, I wonder if they messed with the setting. So, because they did a firmware upgrade on one of the cameras, which wiped all the settings out. And I said, that's fine. But the camera that I was using, the EM1X, all they did was clean it. There were no firmware upgrades. So I'm like, uh-oh, I don't know what's going on. So Matt comes up and I'm showing him what's happening. And, we can't get the camera to work. So Moises, I don't know, was it you? Let me know, Moises. Were you the one that actually came up and told me? But as we're standing there fumbling over the camera and the MC is almost done the introduction, this gentleman comes up and says, hey guys, there's a lens cap on the camera. At which point my heart dropped. Matt looks at me and Matt, Moises, it was you. Okay, great. So Moises is the guy that called me out, but he also saved me because I was going into complete panic mode. I'm supposed to start this presentation. I don't know what's going on. So the first thing, Matt's a great practical joker. Matt's one of those guys, and he will never let me live it down. Matt looks at me, and his first response is, oh, you are never going to hear the end of this. That's it. And I'm sure every time I see Matt from this point forward, he is going to bring up the lens cap immediately. But indeed, the camera wouldn't fire, and then it was firing randomly because it couldn't find focus and lock focus, so it wouldn't fire. So yes, it was the take the damn lens cap off situation. So Moises, yes, thank you. You saved my presentation that day because I just was completely lost. And in my defense, the MC made the announcement, and I did go ahead and I owned it. I because there were people there that I'm sure could tell that I was somewhat stressed, and things were getting a little bit chaotic. So I admitted to it and owned it. This is what happened because it happens. It happens to the best of them, right? So yes, it was kind of one of the funnier moments from my trip to Photo Plus this year. So. All right, so let's see here. Scrolling back up. Steve Wilking. Joe, you just said you go do research. I struggle with the credibility of the source. There's so many people out there putting stuff out. Oh, absolutely, Steve. But you know what? Look, if we're being fair, this is like when people claim that, the idea of identity theft or having a credit card stolen is because of the internet. It's not because of the internet, right? That was around long before the internet happened. When you do research, just like when you're in college, you still have a responsibility to, confirm the credibility of it. The great part about photography research and confirming the credibility is that you can go test it, right? There's a certain amount of logic to it. And then just like with anything else, there is, when you do a lot of research and you do it on an ongoing basis, there's the fact that you find resources that you realize that you can trust, etc. So. And I just realized it's 7:04. I am overtime. So that means we're at 128 minutes, gang, for next week before you come back. And you got a holiday this weekend. So at a minimum, guys, come on. This is the week. If you're in the U.S., tomorrow's the day where you got to drag the camera out. You got to do the family pictures. It's expected because you're the one with the camera in the family. So suck it up and do it. I'm going to do it. I'll have my gear with me, photograph the grandkids, all that kind of stuff. But for those of you that are in the U.S., as always, thank you. Please have an incredible Thanksgiving. And regardless of what everybody says, yes, eat too much. Go for it, okay? But make sure you get out this weekend, take pictures. For those of you in the rest of the world, have a great Thursday and have an awesome weekend. Thank you all for being here. I'll look forward to seeing you guys next Wednesday, which I believe is... it's actually going to be the first December show. So some new format changes, some more of the new stuff will be there. So I'll look forward to seeing you then. But as always, gang, please remember these.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.